Hello, this is David Lewis. In this presentation, I'll give you a brief introduction to goal analysis procedures. Goal analysis is a procedure for examining goals to categorize the type of learning involved in order to produce a visual display for sequencing and presenting instruction. This presentation describes a variety of goal analysis procedures and techniques. Goal analysis helps you to first categorize goals and then produce a goal analysis flowchart. In this presentation, we discuss the techniques for producing these flowcharts. Recall that goal analysis happens during the second step during the Dick and Carey model. And goal analysis is only one of the steps in instructional analysis. The Dick and Carey book devotes 2 chapters to this step in the process because it's so important. There are several presentations for this step in the process. If you haven't already done so, please review the Domains of Learning presentation. That presentation goes over how to categorize goal statements and will serve as a prerequisite for this presentation. So let's talk about goal analysis for a minute. Dick and Carey actually describe 2 different types of goal analysis. In Chapter 1, they mention Robert Mager's work, which is a simple 5-step process for producing performance objectives. In Chapter 2, they discuss a more formal explanation of goal analysis based on Gagne's work. This process leads to subordinate skills analysis, which will be discussed in a separate presentation. This presentation will focus on the version based on Gagne's work, and later, as we discuss performance objectives, we will discuss Mager's work. So let's begin. As Dick and Carey describe it, goal analysis includes 2 major steps. The first step of goal analysis is to categorize the goal statement. To do so, you will use Gagne's Domains of Learning. The second step in goal analysis is to produce a visual display of the specific steps that a learner would do while performing the goal. Let's begin by focusing on this first step, categorizing goals. As discussed in another presentation, Gagne developed a taxonomy of learning called the Domains of Learning. We can use these domains of learning to accomplish the first step of goal analysis. That is, we can categorize our goal statements into one of these types of learning. It will either be an attitude, intellectual skill, verbal information, or a psychomotor skill. Cognitive strategies are typically not described in goal analysis procedures. And most instruction created by instructional designers are usually intellectual skills. Goal analysis is begun only after you have a clear statement of the instructional goal, though. Let's take a look at a goal and do a goal analysis. Let's start with an easy goal and then work our way up. Start a car is a psychomotor goal because it involves the coordination of mental and physical activities. And with lots of practice, this skill may become automated. This goal is very straightforward because it has 3 steps. Everything within the blue box is important as a component of the goal diagram. Notice that the type of learning is mentioned, the goal is written out, and the goal is diagrammed. It's best that instructional designers describe the goal like this in a step-by-step fashion and describe exactly what the learner would be doing as they perform the goal. That is, as opposed to the order that the instructor would teach the skill. Please focus on what the learner would be doing. When there is an order to the steps, we put the steps in a box like this and connect them with an arrow. It's also very important to describe our goal from a performance perspective. This is because it makes it much easier for the learner to know what to do when the time comes. Psychomotor goals or skills are generally a lot easier to work with because many of them are linear stepwise procedures. But not all psychomotor skills are linear. Here, for instance, is a branched nonlinear psychomotor goal. This is because it requires some decision making. Even though decision making is something you cannot see a learner perform, it's still an important part of the process. To represent this step in the flowchart, you must include a branched alternate outcome like this. In this example, the learner could drive to New York, but by doing so, they could take alternate routes to their destination. If attaining the goal includes decision making, the decision step should be placed in a diamond. This allows you to draw a diagram with alternate paths shown leading from the diamond. In our example, one might need to make the decision, should I take the turnpike or the interstate? And that question must be answered to attain the goal. With verbal information goals, there may not be a specific sequence. So in this instance, the learner would not be going from one step to the next, but boxes must be used to describe the topics within a verbal information goal. But because there is not a specific order, you would not need to connect the boxes in your flowchart, and the flowchart would just need to indicate the information that must be covered to accomplish the goal. Here's a more complicated goal. Using a state map is an intellectual skill. So we have categorized this type of learning as shown here. That's step 1. So the type of learning is listed as an intellectual skill there. It's also important to write out the goal statement. The next step is to diagram out the goal. To do so, we must describe each step as a learner performs it and place it in a box. Arrows connect the steps unless there is a decision step. If there is a decision step, please use a diamond to describe that step. Also label the decision choices after each decision step. So here I've labeled the choices as either yes or no. Of course, these labels will vary depending on the question. Finally, it's also helpful to number the steps as shown here. Sometimes a goal will have repetitive steps. If that's the case, you can draw a line to previous steps. This will show that the learner will need to repeat these steps in order to attain the goal. One potential problem that can occur when diagramming a flowchart is that you can run out of space on paper. You can fix this problem by creating breaks like this. Notice how X on the first line connects with X on the second line, and the Y on the second line connects with the Y on the third line. This is how this works. Now then, for the conclusions. As you begin to diagram out your goals, you may ask the question, how big is a step? And how to produce these steps. We will tackle these questions and how best to diagram goals in another presentation. This was just presented as an overview. As we will see in the next chapter, some steps may have sub-steps, and more about that later. Regardless of how large a step is, it should describe an observable behavior, and each step is written out and describes the learner's performance and should have some observable outcome, unless it is a decision step, for instance. But these we discussed, and these you would handle with a diamond and alternate paths, which are labeled. The next presentation describes subordinate skills analysis and will help you identify entry-level skills. We also discuss attitudinal goals in that presentation. If you have time, you may want to get ahead and read the next chapter. That will help you with this process. Thank you for your time. Goodbye.